Hey everyone! I took the time without an episode to sharpen up some of the threads of my story that I felt were lacking. There are some characters during part 1 that didn't get very much attention, at least not as much attention as the others. And it's during this time skip arc that I intend on fleshing those characters out, so that we can appreciate them for all they're truly worth. I didn't want to split attention too much during part 1 because if every episode is focused on all 12 characters, it would be a confusing mess on a nearly constant basis. So some characters get a lot of attention in part 1, and now the others will in the time skip arc. Last time we learned a little about the immediate events following Ino and Sakura's flight from Iwa. We also got some chill reuniting between the currently Konoha 5. It's been just over a month since the main characters started showing up again, but this whole time Shikamaru's been present and I've given him no attention. Well, today we get to see exactly what he got up to following the crumbling of the city. Get ready, because unlike the other characters that were spread out seemingly across the world, Shikamaru's been right at home beside all the other characters that we already know. Not only is this going to be rich with information, but it's all going to be information that everyone doubtlessly knows and wants to know more about. Unlike with Rock Lee's episode, where you're not sure what information is important and what is not. As always, remember to like, subscribe, and comment your observations. Also check out the information below to join the Discord server and join the community. On with the show. Shikamaru's vision was a blur as he lay propped up against some rocks. The shouting of people around him was an incomprehensible echo as his senses remained clouded. He was one of hundreds of people pulled from the ruin of what they thought was Iwa. He was, in fact, the first of hundreds. His body was burned, not severely, but enough to cause concern. Unfortunately, Shizune did not have Lady Tsunade to aid, and her own summoning of Katsuyu was lacking. Katsuyu's output was dependent on the summoner's chakra, which Shizune just did not have an abundant amount of. So the slug summon was kept for the most dire injuries, and Shizune's medical staff was assigned to the lesser injuries. Shikamaru qualified as the severe category because not only was he burned, but half of his body had been crushed by rubble. He was, however, promised that none of it was permanent damage, though maybe long-lasting. One of the very few things he was able to feel was a small Katsuyu moving around his shoulder, whispering to herself as she left unburnt skin in her wake. It was on this day that the Sand and Leaf alike lost greatly. Baki of the Sand's body was recovered, but he had already died in the collapse. Kankura was recovered, with sharp enough reflexes to summon out and hide inside of one of his puppets in the fall. However, he was one of the last people to be discovered, and they nearly missed him since his body was hidden. He had nearly starved to death, despite escaping with such minor injuries. Eventually, Asuma Sarutobi arrived at the camp with a limp Kurenai in his arms. It was clear to Shizune upon seeing Kurenai what her fate was. But as a courtesy to Asuma, she did all that she could. This loss broke Asuma. He picked Kurenai back up and left the fallen city, and that was the last time Shizune, or any of the Leaf, saw him. After being summoned back to Konoha, Lady Tsunade was forced to remain to make sure that Minato and Jiraiya would awaken. But while Minato recovered in just a day, Jiraiya remained in a mysterious coma that Tsunade could not rouse him from. Minato's swift recovery allowed her, however, to run back to the land of Earth to aid Shizune. She would take a direct route and completely miss the fleeing Ino and Sakura. Upon arriving, she would conjure out a far more powerful Katsuyu and set to healing everyone in record time. The most severe cases were brought back to Konoha, Leaf and Sand alike. Everyone else was healed in the moment, and an order to retreat was given once it was obvious that hostile forces were still in the area. Perhaps they caught a glimpse of Tsunade that they chose to keep their distance. Or perhaps these mysterious enemies were compassionate or had other orders to remain at bay. Otherwise it would have been easy pickings to assault the camp of the infirm. For the next month, Shikamaru's life was a smear. He was eventually carried to Konoha, where their most prestigious medical equipment was, and Lady Tsunade would personally tend to him. When he finally regained clarity, Lady Tsunade told him that, unaided, his injuries would have taken a year or two minimum to recover from. With her help, it should only be another week or two before he was good to go again, so about 6 weeks total. A day before being discharged from the hospital, Shikamaru would receive a visit from Lord Hokage, who debriefed him on his actions in the land of Earth. "We won the war," Minato told him while pacing around the foot of Shikamaru's bed, "but not without devastating losses. 80% of our Jonin forces were killed, and half of the Chunin forces were lost. I've also lost half my Anbu in Danzo's attempted uprising." "So," Minato muttered, "in an effort to build back our forces at least somewhat, all surviving Genin from the war are being given the Chunin promotion. But we will not promote existing Chunin to Jonin. We will have to make do with a primary Chunin force for the time being. And for those who fall short of their rank, can also lose it in the future. For now, this is necessary to keep up appearances." It felt hasty, but Shikamaru fully understood the decision. They needed to at least appear like they kept their strength to neighbors, allies, and enemies alike. "We will lessen the barrier to entry for Academy kids to become Genin as well," Minato tells him. "Despite this life of war coming to a close soon, Konoha will be entering a very challenging regrowth. We need everyone to be ready and willing for any challenge," Minato tells him, finally stopping and looking directly at Shikamaru. "There's a new power developing in the ashes of the land of Earth. We need to send a team out there as soon as possible to investigate, and you have been selected as a member of that squad." When Shikamaru asked who he would be assigned to, Minato also told him that team sizes have been reduced to 3 people as well, with or without a captain. Nodding, Shikamaru suggests then that he can go with Sasuke and Neji, since he's worked with them before. Unless Minato needs a Jonin to go with them, of course, in which case Neji can stay behind in that person's place. Sighing, Minato tells him that he's the only one of his graduating class to make it home. The rest are missing in action, or quite possibly dead. "All?" Shikamaru wonders to a silent, nodding response. Head dropping to his lap, Shikamaru wondered how that could happen. 2 of them were Jinchuriki. How could they so easily be overpowered or whisked away? Several were heirs to their respective houses. With Sasuke and Akane both missing, that meant that Shisui was the last of the bloodline for an ancient house, and he was a traitor. And Naruto, Minato's own son, to have vanished? Nodding, Shikamaru looked back to Minato and asked if he could afford to send another clan heir away right now. Minato sighs again, tired. He has no choice now. He has to send his most valuable people for the security of their village and nation. And so 2 weeks passed, and Shikamaru was sent out with Kakashi and Hyuga. Their mission was to avoid combat at all possible costs and just scout and surveil this new invasion force that seemed to have come from nowhere. Shikamaru hoped that this would be a distraction from his thoughts as they flit between all of his friends that he may never see again. Squeezing his eyes shut and shaking his head as if to shed the thought, Shikamaru continued at Kakashi's side as they traveled to the now proclaimed Land of Sound, formerly Land of Earth. The cloud and sand continued their efforts against the water, who was proving formidable. In the meantime, the leaf would shore up defenses, so this new people would not launch surprise assaults against their major neighbor nations, the sand or leaf. As it was, it would normally take a couple years at least to build infrastructure for a sudden nation like this. They were also to investigate as to whether the land of Earth had been fully demolished, or if there were survivors hiding somewhere. Shikamaru knew that it had been a month, but everything had already radically changed. Villages that had been flattened were rebuilt. Roads were even being maintained. Despite these unknown forces making these changes, though, Kakashi insisted that they treat them as enemies to avoid at all costs. They took a different route than during the invasion, traveling further west to investigate the other parts of the Land of Earth. After a couple weeks of travel, they arrived to a village that flew no banners and did not even have guards to protect it. When they approached, cautiously of course, the villagers accepted them and allowed them to enter to buy supplies. In the local tavern, they learned from various people about what was going on from their perspective. The Sound Ninja swooped in like vultures to claim all the space that the leaf had run through. As for the rest of the untouched land, however, they refused to launch any offensive excursions. But if that wasn't enough, the Tsuchikage lost half his forces when the Peaceful were furious that he wouldn't launch a counter-offensive to retake their land. The resulting fight forced a schism within the Land of Earth. And now the previously great nation was split into three. The Land of Sound, which as previously stated, took up the areas that the leaf had conquered. The Land of Earth, which was a sliver of its original size, separated on the far side of the Land of Sound from the rest of the world. The Land of Dirt, a vestigial nation that had willfully split off from the Land of Earth. They were the same people, but with different notions of the war. The Land of Dirt didn't want wars. They simply wanted to build their homes and live in peace. So far, the Land of Sound showed them no hostility despite having unguarded villages. It left them confused as to the goals of the Land of Sound. This at least confirmed that the Tsuchikage had survived the encounter at the Fallen City. However, there were no known eyewitnesses to what exactly had occurred following the collapse of the city and Lord Orochimaru's death. Not wanting to put these peaceful settlements into danger, Kakashi insisted that they continued to camp under the stars. Shikamaru understood the intention and agreed with it, but there was a massive disadvantage to camping outside, when Shikamaru had the assigned time to keep watch. It was in these moments, when he was alone with just his thoughts, that he would brood about his lost friends. Of course, first to mind were Choji and Ino. He'd already gone through the hurt of marching to war while Choji was kidnapped by a turncoat. He never really recovered from that hurt, instead pushing the thoughts aside for what he faced in the moment. But Ino always lacked the confidence to be out on her own. She had grown up alongside Choji and Shikamaru, training to be secondary wardens to the beast within her. The thought of her out there somewhere, alone, worried Shikamaru enough to rob him of sleep even when his watch ended. Never mind Sasuke and Neji, his original teammates. While both were extremely capable on their own, the fear struck of what torture they may go through so that enemies unseen might get their hands on those eyes. The same as Hinata. The House of Hyuga was under grave threat with those two missing. The others like Tenten, Rock Lee, and Sakura didn't even have special techniques for their own survival. They might not be hunted, but nor would people seek to help them, especially in this hostile land. Shino and Kiba could handle themselves, but alone? Had they both been thoughts cut off by the rustling of Kakashi, Shikamaru quickly rubbed his eyes dry and nodded to Kakashi for their changing of the watch. Putting a hand on Shikamaru's shoulder, Kakashi gestured for him to stay for a while. Shikamaru, when I was your age, Lord Hokage hadn't yet reached the prestigious title, Kakashi tells him, taking in a deep breath of the cool night air. At that time, he was my sensei, just as how he initially made me your sensei. But times were different then, and regardless of age, anyone could become Chunin or Jonin. And so I had been recognized already, and they gave me the rank of Jonin. My team was Obito Uchiha and Rin Nohara. We had our differences, but before the end, we were the best of friends. Obito fell when we were rescuing Rin from an underhanded enemy tactic. That's how I got this eye. It was his last gift to me. He was crushed. Enemies were still abound. We had to abandon him as he lay dying. It was horrible. And poor Rin, she had the worst of luck. Not only was she taken then, what caused Obito to die, but later again by foolish mist ninja. Their current Mizukage, Yagura Karatachi, thought it would be clever to put the Three Tails into Rin on a timed seal, so that it would burst forth near the village and destroy us. I was alone to stop her. There was no other choice. At her request, I executed her. It was in her dying moments, actually, that Lord Forth appeared and performed some of the fastest seals I've ever seen, and extracted the beast from her before her last breath. But that's a story for another time. The point is that I had to watch my two closest friends die. I abandoned one and killed the other. And it took a long time before I opened myself up to having a friend again. And when I finally did, it was Mike Guy. He was nearly as accomplished as myself, but allowed for the joy of life to fill him. I knew he was disciplined and strong, but he was also the village's biggest goof. And now the reports say that he fell fighting the five-tailed beast, alone, against an entity of pure power. My one friend, and I couldn't even be by his side. And I would never want anyone to feel that guilt that I've had to throughout my life as a result of those events. What happened, happened. It just did. There was nothing you could have done to prevent any of it. In fact, you nearly bit the dust yourself. Perhaps, try to follow by my example. Live for them. If they really are all lost, live the best life possible. The kind of life they would all be proud to have. Name your accomplishments for them. Don't revel in your sorrows and let the darkness in. I don't think Choji would like to see you sulking. Ino would be looking to you for confidence, for that infallible knowing that you're reliable for. Taking a breath, Kakashi let silence fall between them for a time. Do you know where they were last seen? Shikamaru asks, his voice nearly catching in his throat. Well, let's see. Kakashi thinks to himself. They all went missing in a vacuum. No one saw anything. We only know that Hinata is somewhere in the land of water, or at least she was for a time, and Choji was kidnapped by Shisui. But when Ko and your dad's team assaulted the trader's hideout, they found no trace of him. It's the not knowing that bothers me the most, Shikamaru admits quietly. Nodding, Kakashi let silence fall for a few minutes before slapping Shikamaru on the shoulder and telling him to get some sleep. So they traveled around the land of dirt, an odd name chosen by the protesters of the Tsuchikage's war decisions. Once they had collected all the information they could on the sound, they re-entered the newly claimed land in search of their leader. Kakashi enlightened the team to the sound's involvement in their Chunin exams, but that they pulled out after the Forest of Death. At the time, they called themselves a new ninja outfit, and therefore had no home. And now they were swooping in and stealing the remains of the land of Earth. Their intentions were a complete unknown. Settling in one of the thousands of holes on the outskirts of the fallen Iwa city, they waited for movement. Ko had his Byakugan activated and was ready to give the signal at the first sign. The citizens from the land of dirt were not shy to reveal that it was a dummy city meant to trap and destroy the Leaf Army. The Tsuchikage insisted that the cost of building the mock city was worth it to take out the superior army. He had sent a corps of ninja to sacrifice to keep up appearance that it was the city that everyone sought out. Some transformed into women and children, as well as building the city atop a prominent tunnel that led directly to the coast. They gave up a lot for that trick, but clearly it had worked. Eventually, Ko spots three men exit the fallen city and stop to chat to each other. Like the reports said, each of them had a large purple rope tied around their waists. They stood quite close together, two men and a girl, perhaps a little older than Shikamaru. Kakashi squinted in annoyance that they couldn't hear them. Any information overheard would doubtlessly be helpful in figuring out their intentions. Ko suddenly reaches over and pulls Kakashi down even further into the hole as a fourth man approaches them from outside the village. When the small group notices the man, they walk towards him, stopping several feet short and nod at him as he speaks to them. That's their leader, Shikamaru whispers, noting that they're giving him space. That's either respect or fear. Well observed, Ko smiles, noting that the fourth man's skeleton looks very strange, like it's covered in growths. It's hard to explain. Whether they were afraid of being spotted seemed solved as they spoke loudly and in plain view. Team Kakashi was just a little too far to pick up on the clarity of their words, though. We should note that fourth one's features, so if he shows up again we can easily identify, Shikamaru suggests. You two stay here, Kakashi orders as the fourth man turns to leave. I'll track him and return with details. Surely if he's the leader, we should all follow? Ko asks, dubious of Kakashi's ability. He might overwhelm you. Maybe, if I'm discovered, Kakashi agrees. But I'm faster and quieter alone. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. And without a further word, Kakashi seemed to dissolve to Shikamaru's eyes, but it was just the difference in Kakashi's speed compared to his own. For the next 3 days, Shikamaru and Ko kept a constant surveillance in shifts for any odd movement. Several times Shikamaru felt overexposed, but no one ever came to investigate. They either didn't care, had no idea, or if they did not feel threatened at all. On the third night, Ko observed once more the pale man come to speak to a set of underlings. The group he spoke to was different this time, but more confusing was Kakashi's absence. Wasn't Kakashi meant to be tracking this exact man? Was Ko right? Was Kakashi taken out by the ninja? Just as the first time, the apparent leader spoke for just a few moments before vanishing in a blur of speed. Shikamaru took notes on all that happened. When noon on the next day came, so did Kakashi. Sliding into their cover, Kakashi panted and told them that the man ran far and fast. At some point, he detected Kakashi's presence and left several cold trails to throw him off. Whoever that man was, he was far more dangerous than expected. When Ko explained that the man returned and left again while Kakashi was gone, it leaves a blank stare on the ex-Anbu. At most, Kakashi traveled in one direction for a day and a half to track this man. With his speed, they must have traveled far. Shikamaru wondered where the man was trying to go so far away from here. The Sound clearly wanted to set this location as their home base, so why would their leader only visit for a few minutes every few days before traveling potentially across the nation? This guy's not a leader, Shikamaru surmised after a lot of quiet thought while Kakashi and Ko spoke to one another. He's shown us his pattern, knowingly or otherwise. Wherever he's going, it's to receive further instructions from their true leader. He's just the public face of a greater enemy. You might be right, Ko nodded. He might be strong, but he is also quite young. A revolutionary his age would have become known much easier than our own discovery of him. Surely. Maybe, Kakashi mused quietly. Regardless, we're not here to get killed. If he's a follower of someone greater, we're not the group to stir up trouble. It's beyond our purview, but should we check on the land of Earth and see how dilapidated they've become? Ko asked, seemingly content with the information they've gathered now. No, Kakashi declined. I expected Tsuchikage to either stubbornly shore up his defenses, or swallow his pride and ask even former enemies for aid. We'll know his predicament sooner or later. No, we're going to get this man out on his own and catch him for interrogation, Kakashi decided, to the shock of Shikamaru. Kakashi-sensei, you just said we're not here to stir up trouble, Shikamaru protested. If we're satisfied with our information, we should return to the village. We've already been here for weeks and we've learned a lot. You've learned a lot? A man asks, catching the three off guard in their hole. Looking up, they've been found out by one of the Sound Men. He was tall and dark, and he had 6 arms. Pretty distinguishable, really. Our master spotted you like a week ago and you're still here, the man points out. Did your army leave you behind or something? Lost? Master? Shikamaru wondered to himself, glancing at Kakashi. Even if Kakashi was outstripped in speed by their supposed leader, there was no way he'd be overpowered by this underling, right? Sensei, Shikamaru said, careful not to reveal his allies' names. I think we should do as he says, if he wants to bring us in for questioning. Questioning? The man asks, putting one hand on his chin as if in thought. Maybe that is a good idea. More leafies? A deeper voice came from somewhere further away. The last set got away from me, but not this time. Jirobo! The man shouts in reply. I think we got some victims for our interrogations. Kakashi looks back to Shikamaru, studying the young Chunin for a time. Shikamaru knew that Kakashi was a genius if he was able to reach Jonin by the age of 12. If Kakashi thought he could overpower these underlings, he might agree to be questioned just so that they could outsmart them for information. Relaxing, Kakashi raised his hands and voiced the surrender of his team. The full moon generally lit the path for weary travelers who needed to travel under the blanket of darkness. But the canopy from the trees was so thick that they stopped even a needle of light from getting through to the forest floor below. The predator did not require light to find its prey. Listening, quiet as the grave, the predator's hair stood on end as it crouched low to the ground. The prey had frozen stiff, sure that something unpleasant was nearby, but it could neither see, hear, nor smell the predator hiding in its midst. As if snapping a whip, the predator sprung to action, and before the prey could spring to safety, jaws had closed around its neck and tore into its flesh. The prey did not suffer. It was only seconds before it was gone. Feast! The predator celebrated, standing over the fallen prey. Gnawing, chewing, ripping, the feral predator took in the essence of its prey. Eat! The predator chanted, repeating the word over and over again. Sitting at the mouth of its cave home, the apex predator sat and watched this hunt unfold. The prey caught was typically too fast for the apex predator's children to catch. It was impressive for this outsider to succeed on its first try. Bored now, though, that the hunt had ended, the king of the jungle settled back into its cave for another nap. Come then! Eat! It chanted as its partner decided to take part in the feast. Eat! 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 Eat, Akamaru! And that's the end of today's episode. Shikamaru's episode had an awful lot of dialogue that I didn't feel like I could skip out on, so the continuation for his dilemma will come later. And I said this at the start of the rewrite, but I'll reiterate because it's been a while. My villains are stronger. So while I won't reveal the answer to the question of if he's stronger than Kakashi yet, my Kimimaro is an incredibly formidable foe. We shall see what more information unfolds there. And what fun! We've finally caught a glimpse of the first member of the Konoha 12 to go missing. It's been a very long time, but we finally get to see at least a hint of where he's been. And what's happened to him now that he's turned, feral? It's going to be a lot of fun exploring this storyline. Since he vanished first, I've had the most time to think about where and how he's ended up like a beast. And unlike all the others so far, this one hasn't come home yet. We're just getting a sneak peek at where he is right now. But I think that's enough for now. Until next time, the sky's the limit.